The warm spring sun beat down on Nora Miller's tired face as the stagecoach rattled to a stop in front of the dusty main street of Laredo, Texas. The year was 1875, and at 32 years of age, Nora had just endured the most humiliating experience of her life. Last stop, Laredo. The driver called out, his voice lacking any sympathy for her plight. Nora straightened her faded blue dress and reached for her well-worn carpetbag. 1 week ago, she had arrived in San Antonio full of hope, ready to meet Harold Winters, the man who had agreed to marry her through a mail-order bride arrangement. She had sent him a photograph taken 5 years earlier, the only one she possessed, and had been honest about her age in her letters. But when Harold saw her in person, his face had fallen. "You're too old," he'd said bluntly. "The photograph, you look different now. I need someone younger who can give me many children." The memory stung as Nora descended from the stagecoach. Her savings nearly depleted. She had just enough money for a few nights' lodging before she would need to find work. Laredo hadn't been her destination when she'd left her teaching position in Boston 3 weeks ago. It was simply where fate and her limited funds had deposited her. "Need help with that bag, madam?" a deep voice asked. Nora looked up to see a tall man watching her from the boardwalk, his hat tipped slightly forward to shield his eyes from the sun. His weathered face suggested he was in his late 30s, and his attire-worn boots, dusty denim, and a faded red shirt marked him as a working man, likely a rancher or cowboy. "I can manage, thank you," Nora replied, lifting her chin with the last shred of dignity she possessed. The man nodded and stepped back, but his eyes, a startling shade of blue, remained fixed on her. "New to Laredo?" "Yes," she admitted, seeing no reason to lie. "Just arrived. Family waiting for you?" he asked, leaning against a post. Nora shook her head. "No, I'm alone." She looked down the dusty street, feeling more lost than she cared to admit. "Could you direct me to a respectable boarding house, one that might be affordable for someone with limited means?" The man studied her for a long moment. "Mrs. Peterson's place is 2 blocks down on the right. Clean, safe, and she doesn't ask too many questions." He paused, then extended his hand. "Quinn Keller. I own the Crescent Moon Ranch about 5 miles outside town." "Nora Miller," she replied, briefly shaking his hand. "Thank you for the recommendation, Mr. Keller. Folks call me Quinn." His eyes crinkled slightly at the corners when he smiled. "If you're looking for work, Mrs. Peterson might know of something. The school's been without a teacher since Miss Abernathy married the blacksmith last winter." Nora's heart quickened. Teaching was the one thing she knew how to do well. "Thank you, I'll inquire about it." As Quinn turned to leave, he paused. "One more thing, Miss Miller. Whatever brought you to Laredo looking like the weight of the world's on your shoulders, well, sometimes what seems like bad luck turns out to be just the opposite." With that cryptic statement, he tipped his hat and walked away, his spurs making a rhythmic clicking on the wooden boardwalk. Nora watched him go, then squared her shoulders and headed toward Mrs. Peterson's boarding house. She had no idea what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain: she was done placing her hopes in the hands of men who made promises through letters. Mrs. Peterson turned out to be a plump, silver-haired widow with shrewd eyes and a kind smile. Her boarding house was simple but immaculate, with polished floors and crisp white curtains. "Room and board is $1 a day," Mrs. Peterson explained as she showed Nora to a small room on the 2nd floor. "Or $5 a week if you pay in advance. Includes breakfast and supper." Nora did a quick calculation. "I'll take it for a week," she said, counting out $5 precious from her dwindling funds. Mrs. Peterson pocketed the money and fixed Nora with a knowing look. "Running from something or running to something?" "Neither," Nora replied. "Just starting over." The older woman nodded, seemingly satisfied with the answer. "Well, Laredo's as good a place as any for that. Supper's at 6 sharp, and if you're looking for work, the town council's desperate for a teacher. Pays not much, but it includes a small house behind the schoolhouse." "Actually, I was a teacher in Boston," Nora admitted. "Where would I apply?" "Mayor's office, first thing tomorrow. Though if you were to happen by the Lazy Dog Saloon tonight around 7, you might catch most of the town council having their usual meeting over cards and whiskey." Less formal that way. Nora thanked her and began unpacking her meager belongings. The room was spare but clean: a narrow bed, a washstand with a porcelain basin, and a small desk beneath the window. She placed her mother's Bible on the nightstand, hung her 3 dresses in the wardrobe, and tucked her undergarments into the single drawer beneath it. When she was finished, she sat on the edge of the bed and allowed herself a moment of uncertainty. 3 weeks ago, she had sold nearly everything she owned and left Boston behind, convinced that the letters from Harold Winters represented her last chance at marriage and family. Now here she was in a strange town with no connections and little money. At 32, she knew her prospects were dim. Most men wanted younger brides, women with long childbearing years ahead of them. Enough self-pity, she muttered to herself. She washed her face, pinned up her chestnut hair, and changed into her second-best dress, a serviceable navy blue with white piping at the collar. If she was going to present herself to the town council, even informally, she needed to look respectable. At precisely 7 o'clock, Nora stepped into the Lazy Dog Saloon, immediately conscious of the sudden lull in conversation as several patrons turned to stare at her. It wasn't a proper place for a lady, but Mrs. Peterson had assured her that on quiet weeknights, it was respectable enough for her purpose. "Can I help you, madam?" the barkeeper asked, looking surprised to see a woman alone in his establishment. "I'm looking for members of the town council," Nora replied, keeping her voice steady despite her discomfort. "Back table," he said, gesturing toward a corner where 4 men sat playing cards. "Though if you're selling something, they've already told the last 3 peddlers they're not interested." "I'm not selling anything," Nora assured him. "I understand the town is in need of a teacher." The barkeeper's eyebrows rose. "That we are, been sending the young uns to New Braunfels for schooling, which isn't sitting well with most parents." Gathering her courage, Nora approached the table where the men were engaged in their card game. She recognized Quinn Keller immediately, though he seemed just as surprised to see her as she was to find him among the town council. "Gentlemen," she said, addressing the table, "my name is Nora Miller. I arrived in Laredo today and understand you're in need of a teacher. I taught for 10 years in Boston and would like to apply for the position." A balding man with spectacles perched on his nose looked up from his cards. "Mayor Franklin Dawes," he introduced himself. "This here's Doc Wilson, Mr. Hargrove who owns the Mercantile, and Quinn Keller who we've met," Quinn interjected, standing to offer Nora his chair. "Miss Miller and I made acquaintance when she arrived on today's stage." Mayor Dawes studied Nora carefully. "What brings you all the way from Boston to Laredo, Miss Miller?" Nora hesitated. The truth was too embarrassing to share, but she'd never been skilled at fabrication. "A personal disappointment," she admitted. "I came west hoping for a fresh start." The mayor exchanged glances with the others. "Well, we've all had those, I suppose. You have references." "I do, though they're with my belongings in San Antonio. I can write to have them forwarded." "San Antonio?" Quinn asked, his brow furrowing. "A brief stop on my journey," Nora replied, unwilling to elaborate. Mayor Dawes cleared his throat. "School term doesn't start for another month. That should give you time to get your references in order. Pays $30 a month plus the teacher's cottage. It's small but serviceable. We expect around 20 pupils, ages 6 to 16. "That sounds acceptable," Nora said, relief washing over her. $30 a month would be enough to live on, especially with housing provided. "There's one other matter," Doc Wilson interjected, stroking his gray beard. "The school board, which is essentially us 4 plus Mrs. Hargrove, has traditionally required the teacher to be unmarried, with the understanding that should she marry, she'll resign her position." Nora almost laughed at the irony. "I assure you, gentlemen, marriage is not in my future. I'm quite past the age where that's a concern." Quinn's head snapped up at that, his blue eyes narrowing as he studied her. "You can't be more than 30. 32, Nora corrected, feeling the familiar flush of embarrassment. "Practically ancient in terms of marriage prospects, as I was recently reminded." The men had the decency to look uncomfortable at her candor. Mayor Dawes cleared his throat again. "Well, pending your references checking out, I believe we're all in agreement that you're hired, Miss Miller." "Thank you," Nora said, genuine gratitude in her voice. "I won't let you down." As the men returned to their game, Quinn stepped away from the table. "May I walk you back to Mrs. Peterson's?" It's getting dark and you're new to town. That's not necessary, Nora began, but Quinn had already retrieved his hat from a hook on the wall. I insist, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Outside, the evening air had cooled considerably, and Nora was grateful for her shawl. They walked in silence for half a block before Quinn spoke. San Antonio, he said, his voice neutral. Would that have anything to do with Harold Winters? Nora stopped in her tracks, stunned. How did you know that name? Quinn's expression softened. My cousin Martha works as a housekeeper for the Winters family. She wrote to me about Harold advertising for a mail-order bride, then sending her back when she arrived because he found her too old. Said the poor woman had come all the way from Boston. Mortification washed over Nora in a hot wave. That would be me, she admitted, her voice barely audible. How humiliating to know people are discussing my rejection. Martha wasn't gossiping, Quinn assured her quickly. She was outraged on your behalf. Said Harold had no right to treat any woman that way, especially one who'd traveled so far based on his promise. Nora resumed walking, eager to end the uncomfortable conversation. Well, it hardly matters now. I've found employment and can support myself. I don't need a husband. Quinn fell into step beside her. I never said you did, but I'm curious, why did you get off the stage in Laredo? There was nothing keeping you from continuing to another town. Money, Nora admitted bluntly. I had enough for the fare to Laredo and a few days' lodging. After that, I would have been destitute. They had reached Mrs. Peterson's boarding house, and Nora turned to bid him good night, only to find Quinn studying her with an intensity that made her uneasy. Harold Winters is a fool, he said finally. 32 isn't old, Miss Miller. It's right on time for some of us. Before Nora could respond to his cryptic statement, Quinn tipped his hat and melted into the darkness, leaving her to ponder his words as she climbed the steps to the boarding house. The next morning, Nora woke early, determined to explore the town that would be her new home. After a breakfast of cornbread and strong coffee with Mrs. Peterson, and two other boarders, a young bank clerk named Timothy and an elderly widow, Mrs. Hollister Nora set out with directions to the schoolhouse. Laredo in daylight revealed itself to be a growing frontier town. The main street boasted a bank, a mercantile, a milliner's shop, the Lazy Dog Saloon, and various other businesses. People nodded politely as she passed, curious about the newcomer but not unfriendly. The schoolhouse sat at the edge of town, a simple white clapboard building with a small bell tower. Behind it stood a modest cottage that would be her home. Nora circled the schoolhouse, peering through windows at the rows of desks and the large chalkboard. It was far less grand than her classroom in Boston, but it held promise. As she was inspecting the cottage, finding it indeed small but clean, with a front room, bedroom, and kitchen, she heard the approach of a horse. Turning, she found Quinn Keller dismounting a handsome chestnut gelding. "Morning, Miss Miller," he called, tethering his horse to a post. "Thought I might find you here." "Mr. Keller," she acknowledged, wondering why the sight of him caused such a flutter in her chest. "I was just acquainting myself with my new workplace." Quinn approached, carrying a small bundle wrapped in brown paper. "I brought you something." A welcome gift of sorts. Surprised, Nora accepted the package and carefully unwrapped it to reveal a brass key and a leather-bound book. "A History of Texas," she read the title aloud. "Figured your Boston education might be lacking in Texas history," Quinn said with a smile. "And the key is for the cottage. Mayor Dawes asked me to drop it by since my ranch is out this way." "Thank you," Nora said, genuinely touched by the thoughtfulness. "I was actually wondering how I'd get in to assess what supplies I might need." Quinn gestured toward the cottage. "Shall we?" The interior was dusty but otherwise in good repair. The front room contained a small sofa, a rocking chair, a bookshelf, and a table with two chairs. The bedroom held a narrow bed with a faded quilt and a chest of drawers. The kitchen had a cookstove, a sink with a pump, and shelves for provisions. "It needs a woman's touch," Quinn observed, "but it's solid. Roof doesn't leak and the stove draws well. Previous teacher, Miss Abernathy, left it in good condition." "It's perfect," Nora said, already envisioning how she would make it home. "I can move in right away and save what's left of my funds." Quinn nodded, then seemed to hesitate before speaking. "About what I said last night, I hope I didn't make you uncomfortable." Nora busied herself inspecting the stove to avoid meeting his gaze. Not at all. I appreciate your kindness, Mr. Keller. Quinn, he corrected gently. And it wasn't just kindness. He took a deep breath. Look, I know we've just met and this might seem forward, but I'd like to call on you properly. If you're amenable. Nora's head snapped up in surprise. Call on me. But I just told you that you're 32 and consider yourself past marrying age, Quinn finished for her. I heard you. I'm 39 myself, Miss Miller. Been too busy building my ranch to think much about a wife until recently. Now I find myself with a successful operation and no one to share it with. Mr. Keller Quinn, Nora amended. I appreciate the gesture, but I've just endured a very public rejection based entirely on my age. I'm not eager to set myself up for another disappointment. Quinn's expression softened. I'm not Harold Winters, and I meant what I said. You're right on time for me. Not too old, not too young, just right. He moved toward the door. Think about it. I'll come by in a few days to see if you need any help settling in. After he left, Nora sank into the rocking chair, conflicted emotions warring within her. Quinn Keller seemed sincere, and there was something about him that stirred feelings she'd long suppressed. But the wound from Harold's rejection was too fresh, the fear of another humiliation too great. She spent the next few days dividing her time between preparing for the upcoming school term and making the cottage habitable. Mrs. Peterson helped her transport her few belongings from the boarding house, and several townswomen stopped by with welcoming gifts: home-canned preserves, a patchwork quilt, a plant for the windowsill. On her fourth day in Laredo, Nora was sweeping the schoolhouse floor when the door opened, admitting a tall woman with auburn hair twisted into a practical knot. Miss Miller, the woman inquired. I'm Martha Keller, Quinn's cousin. I heard you were getting the schoolhouse ready and thought you might appreciate some help. Martha, Nora said, recognition dawning. Quinn mentioned you worked for the Winters family in San Antonio. Martha's green eyes, so like Quinn's in shape though different in color, flashed with anger. Until yesterday. I gave my notice after what Harold did to you. Any man who judges a woman's worth solely on her age doesn't deserve respect, much less loyalty. Nora was touched by the stranger's indignation on her behalf. That's very kind, but you shouldn't have jeopardized your position on my account. Nonsense, Martha declared, taking the broom from Nora's hands. I've been meaning to move to Laredo anyway. Quinn's been after me for years to help run the house at Crescent Moon. The ranch is doing well enough now that he can afford to pay me properly. She paused in her sweeping. And between us, I think he's finally ready to fill that big house with more than just himself. Nora felt her cheeks warm. If you're suggesting, I'm not suggesting anything, Martha interrupted with a knowing smile. Just observing that my cousin's been alone too long, and so I suspect have you. With Martha's help, the schoolhouse was thoroughly cleaned by midday. The two women shared the lunch. Nora had packed bread, cheese, and apples sitting on the schoolhouse steps. Tell me about Quinn, Nora found herself asking, her curiosity getting the better of her. Martha considered the question. He came to Texas right after the war with nothing but determination and the horse he rode in on. Worked as a ranch hand, saved every penny, then bought a small parcel of land when cattle prices dropped in '67. Built it up acre by acre, head by head. He's stubborn, honorable to a fault, and beneath that quiet exterior has the biggest heart of any man I know. She gave Nora a sidelong glance. Lost his wife in childbirth back in '62, the baby too. He was just 26, never even looked at another woman seriously until now. The revelation stunned Nora. I had no idea he'd been married. He doesn't talk about it, Martha said softly, but it shaped him, made him cautious with his heart, but also made him value things others might overlook. She paused meaningfully. Like a woman with enough life experience to know her own mind. Before Nora could respond, the sound of approaching hoofbeats made them both look up. Quinn himself was riding toward the schoolhouse, leading a second horse laden with packages. Speaking of the devil, Martha murmured, standing to greet her cousin. Quinn Keller, what brings you to town twice in 1 week? Quinn dismounted, his eyes finding Nora's before addressing his cousin. Supplies for the schoolhouse. Mayor Dawes mentioned Miss Miller would need chalk, slates, and books. He nodded toward the second horse. And I see you've met our new teacher. Indeed I have, Martha replied with a grin. Been helping her clean the place up. It's almost ready for students. Quinn began unloading the packages. Brought some things for your cottage too, Miss Miller. Lamp oil, coffee, flour, and such. Figured you might not have had time to stock your pantry yet. That's very thoughtful, Nora said, touched by his consideration. But you really shouldn't have gone to the trouble. No trouble, Quinn assured her. I was coming to town anyway to fetch Martha. He glanced at his cousin. Got your room all ready at the ranch. Mrs. Figueroa's been baking all morning in anticipation of your arrival. Martha laughed. Rosa Figueroa still running your kitchen with an iron fist. And the rest of the house, Quinn admitted with a grin. Though she'll be glad to have you take charge of the household accounts, numbers were never her strong suit. As the cousins chatted, Nora helped unpack the school supplies primers, chalk, slates, a new American flag, and a stack of McGuffey readers. The generosity of the town council, or perhaps Quinn himself, was overwhelming. These are wonderful, she exclaimed, examining a brand new wall map of the United States. The children will be so fortunate to have such fine materials. Quinn watched her enthusiasm with evident pleasure. Town wants a proper school. These youngsters deserve the same education they'd get back east. With the supplies unpacked and arranged in the schoolhouse, Quinn turned to Nora. Would you join Martha and me for supper at the hotel dining room? I'd like to show my cousin that Laredo has at least one establishment with decent food. Nora hesitated, aware that dining publicly with Quinn might spark gossip in the small town, yet she found herself nodding agreement before she could overthink it. I'd like that, thank you. The hotel dining room was the finest establishment in Laredo, with white tablecloths, silver cutlery, and a menu that offered more than the standard frontier fare of beans and salt pork. Quinn secured a table by the window and held Nora's chair with the manners of a gentleman. The roast beef is particularly good, he advised as they perused the menus. And Mrs. Mitchell makes a peach cobbler that rivals any in Texas. The meal proved delightful, with Martha regaling them with stories of San Antonio society, and Quinn occasionally interjecting with tales of his early days in Texas. Nora found herself laughing more than she had in years, the burden of her recent humiliation temporarily lifted. As they finished their cobbler, Martha excused herself to speak with an acquaintance at another table, leaving Nora and Quinn alone. Thank you for this evening, Nora said sincerely. I haven't enjoyed myself so much in a long time. Quinn's eyes crinkled at the corners. It's good to see you smile, Miss Miller. You have a beautiful one. Nora felt a blush rising in her cheeks. You're being kind again. Honest, not kind, Quinn corrected gently. And since we're being honest, I'd like to know if you've considered my request to call on you properly. Nora traced the rim of her water glass with one finger, gathering her thoughts. I have considered it, she admitted, and while I'm flattered, I must confess I'm afraid. Of what? Quinn asked, his voice soft. Of believing again, of hoping. She met his gaze directly. Of finding out that once you truly know me, you'll decide I'm not what you want after all. Quinn reached across the table, his hand covering hers. Here's what I know already, Nora Miller. You're brave enough to travel across the country on the promise of a better life. You're resilient enough to pick yourself up after a crushing disappointment and forge ahead. You're educated, kind, and when you smile, it lights up your entire face. His thumb gently stroked her knuckles. What I want is the chance to know more. That's all I'm asking for. The sincerity in his blue eyes melted something inside Nora, a frozen part of her heart that had been hardened by disappointment. All right, she said softly. You may call on me Quinn Keller. The smile that broke across his face was like the sun emerging from behind clouds. Sunday, he said. I'll take you on a proper tour of Laredo and the surrounding countryside. Maybe pack a picnic lunch. That sounds lovely, Nora agreed, suddenly looking forward to Sunday with an eagerness that surprised her. Martha returned to the table, giving them both a knowing look. Well, I see you two have come to some sort of understanding. Quinn shot his cousin a warning glance, but his smile remained. I'll be showing Miss Miller the sights on Sunday. Splendid, Martha declared. Perhaps you'll bring her out to Crescent Moon sometime soon. I'd love to show her the improvements you've made to the house. As Quinn escorted Nora back to her cottage after dinner, the night air was fragrant with blooming jasmine. They walked slowly, neither seeming eager for the evening to end. I hope Martha didn't overwhelm you, Quinn said as they approached the cottage. She can be rather forthright. I like her, Nora assured him. It's refreshing to meet someone who speaks her mind. They paused at her door, an awkward moment stretching between them. Quinn cleared his throat. I should let you rest. Sunday morning, 10 o'clock, I'll be ready, Nora promised. Quinn hesitated, then reached out to take her hand. Bringing it to his lips, he placed a gentle kiss on her knuckles. Good night, Nora. The gesture, old-fashioned and gallant, sent a shiver of pleasure up her arm. Good night, Quinn. After he left, Nora stood on her small porch, watching his tall figure disappear down the moonlit road. For the first time since Harold Winters had crushed her hopes, she felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest, the dangerous, exhilarating sensation of hope. Sunday dawned clear and bright, with a gentle breeze that promised to keep the Texas heat at bay. Nora dressed with special care in her best day dress, a cornflower blue that brought out the amber flecks in her brown eyes. She pinned her hair up, but allowed a few soft curls to frame her face, a concession to vanity she rarely permitted herself. At precisely 10 o'clock, Quinn arrived, driving a smart buggy pulled by a matching pair of bays. He had traded his work clothes for clean denims, a pressed shirt, and a leather vest. His hair was neatly combed, and he'd trimmed his beard. The effect was striking, and Nora felt a flutter in her stomach as he helped her into the buggy. You look beautiful, he said simply, his admiration evident in his eyes. Thank you, she replied, smoothing her skirts. You're quite handsome yourself. Quinn smiled and clicked to the horses. I thought we'd start with a tour of the town, then head out toward the river for our picnic. The tour was thorough and informative. Quinn showed her the courthouse, the newly built Catholic church, the community hall where dances were held monthly, and pointed out the homes of prominent citizens. Everywhere they went, people greeted Quinn with respect and warmth, and regarded Nora with friendly curiosity. You're well liked here, Nora observed as they left town, heading toward the Rio Grande. Quinn shrugged modestly. I've been around long enough to prove myself trustworthy, I suppose. Folks know I keep my word. They followed a winding dirt road that led through mesquite and cottonwood trees until they reached a peaceful spot overlooking the river. Quinn spread a blanket in the shade of a massive cottonwood and unpacked a wicker basket containing fried chicken, biscuits, pickled vegetables, and a jar of lemonade. Martha packed enough for an army, he apologized, laying out the feast. It looks wonderful, Nora assured him, accepting a tin plate laden with food. They ate companionably, the conversation flowing easily between them. Quinn told her about building his ranch, the challenges and triumphs of cattle raising in Texas. Nora shared stories of her teaching experiences in Boston, her love of literature, and her dream of someday writing a book of her own. What kind of book? Quinn asked, genuinely interested. Nora hesitated, then admitted, a novel about a woman who finds strength she never knew she possessed. It's silly, I know. Not silly at all, Quinn disagreed. I think you'd write beautifully. Your letters must have been quite compelling for Harold Winters to choose you. The mention of Harold made Nora stiffen slightly, but Quinn continued, his voice gentle. I'm not bringing him up to upset you. I just mean you clearly have a way with words if you can convey your personality through letters. Nora relaxed, touched by his understanding. Thank you. Though clearly my words painted a more appealing picture than the reality, Quinn frowned. I doubt that very much. Harold Winters is a shallow man who couldn't recognize the treasure right in front of him. His blue eyes held hers intently. His loss is my good fortune. The directness of his statement made Nora's breath catch. You hardly know me, Quinn. I know enough, he replied simply. The rest I look forward to discovering. He reached across the blanket to take her hand. I know this is fast, Nora, but out here, life doesn't wait. When something good comes along, you have to recognize it and hold on. The sincerity in his voice touched her deeply. I'm trying to believe that, Quinn. It's just difficult after. After being told you're too old, he finished for her. by a man who clearly wouldn't know a good woman if she sat down at his breakfast table every morning for a year. Quinn's thumb traced circles on her palm. 32 isn't old, Nora. It's experienced. It's knowing who you are and what you want. It's exactly what I've been waiting for. Nora felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. How do you always know the right thing to say? Quinn smiled. Not always, just when it matters. He released her hand and reached into his vest pocket, pulling out a small package wrapped in tissue paper. I brought you something. A token, you might say. Surprised, Nora unwrapped the package to find a delicate silver bookmark engraved with a crescent moon. It's beautiful, she breathed, running her finger over the intricate design. Thought it might be useful for a teacher who loves books, Quinn said, looking pleased at her reaction. And a reminder of me when you're reading. As if I could forget you, Nora murmured, then blushed at her own forwardness. Quinn's smile widened. Good, because I certainly can't get you out of my mind, Nora Miller. The picnic concluded with slices of apple pie that Martha had baked that morning. As they packed up the remnants of their meal, Quinn pointed toward a distant ridge. That's Crescent Moon land, stretching from here to that ridge. Not the biggest spread in the county, but it's good land, well watered. The house sits just over that rise, about 4 miles from town. You've built something wonderful, Nora said sincerely. You should be proud. I am, Quinn acknowledged. But lately I've been thinking it's not much use building something if you've no one to share it with. His gaze was steady, meaningful. On the drive back to town, they fell into a comfortable silence, broken occasionally by Quinn pointing out interesting landmarks or sharing anecdotes about the area. As they approached Nora's cottage, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in spectacular shades of orange and pink. Quinn helped her down from the buggy, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. I have to ride to San Antonio tomorrow on business, he said regretfully. I'll be gone about a week. Disappointment flooded Nora, surprising her with its intensity. I see. Would it be presumptuous to ask if I might write to you while I'm away? Quinn asked. Nora smiled at the irony. More letters from a man I barely know. I should know better. Quinn's face fell, but Nora quickly continued, but I find I'd very much like to receive your letters, Quinn Keller. Relief washed over his features. I'll write every day, he promised. Then, hesitantly, may I call on you again when I return? Yes, Nora said simply, her heart lighter than it had been in years. Quinn seemed to debate with himself for a moment, then stepped closer, one hand gently cradling her cheek. I'd very much like to kiss you goodbye, Nora, if you'll permit it. Her pulse quickening, Nora nodded almost imperceptibly. Quinn leaned down, his lips brushing hers in a kiss so tender it brought tears to her eyes. It was brief, chaste even, but filled with promise. Until I return, he murmured against her lips before stepping back. Nora watched him drive away, her fingertips touching her lips where the warmth of his kiss still lingered. The schoolteacher from Boston, who had been deemed too old by one man, had somehow caught the attention of another who seemed to find her age an asset rather than a liability. It was a turn of events so unexpected that Nora hardly dared believe in it, yet the silver bookmark in her hand was real, as was the memory of Quinn's kiss. Perhaps, just perhaps, Harold's rejection had led her exactly where she was meant to be all along. True to his word, Quinn wrote to Nora every day of his absence. The letters arrived by stage, sometimes 2 or 3 at once, each filled with details of his business dealings, descriptions of San Antonio, and increasingly tender expressions of his growing affection for her. The school term began while Quinn was away, keeping Nora busy with her 22 pupils, ranging from shy 6-year-olds to gangly teenagers. The work was fulfilling, the children eager to learn, and Nora found herself settling into Laredo life with surprising ease. Martha visited often, bringing fresh eggs from the ranch and staying for tea. Through these visits, Nora learned more about Quinn, his dedication to his ranch hands and their families, his quiet generosity to neighbors in need, his passion for books that rivaled her own. He's building a library at the ranch, Martha confided during one visit. Ordered shelves from a carpenter in San Antonio and books from catalogs, says a home isn't complete without books. The information warmed Nora's heart. A man who valued education and literature was a rare find on the frontier. On the evening of Quinn's expected return, Nora was sitting on her porch, grading spelling tests by the light of a lantern when the sound of hoofbeats made her look up. Quinn appeared in the gathering dusk, his horse dust covered from the journey but his smile as bright as ever. "You're back," Nora said, standing as he dismounted and secured his horse to her porch rail. "Couldn't stay away a moment longer," Quinn admitted, climbing the steps to stand before her. He looked weary from travel, but his eyes drank her in as if memorizing every detail of her appearance. "Did you receive my letters?" he asked, suddenly uncertain. "Every one," Nora assured him. "They were wonderful, Quinn, thank you." Relief crossed his face. "I meant every word, Nora, every word." In his final letter, Quinn had written that his feelings for her were growing deeper by the day, that he thought of her constantly, that the week apart had convinced him she was becoming essential to his happiness. The declaration had both thrilled and frightened Nora. "You must be exhausted," she said now, gesturing to the porch swing. "Sit, please. Can I get you some water, coffee? Just your company," Quinn replied, sinking onto the swing with a grateful sigh. "It's been a long ride." Nora joined him on the swing, conscious of his nearness, the clean masculine scent of him despite the dust of travel. "Was your business successful?" "Very," Quinn confirmed. "Secured a contract to supply beef to the fort at San Antonio. It's a good price and steady income for the ranch." He paused, then added, "I also visited Harold Winters." Nora stiffened. "You did what?" Quinn's expression was apologetic but determined. "I needed to understand the man who could reject someone like you, and I wanted him to know what a mistake he'd made." Mortification washed over Nora. "Quinn, how could you? It's humiliating enough without. I didn't embarrass you," Quinn assured her quickly. "I merely introduced myself as a rancher from Laredo who had met the lady he had so foolishly sent away. Told him you were thriving as our town's new teacher and had been warmly welcomed by everyone." He smiled slightly. The man seemed quite confused that anyone would find you more valuable than the 18-year-old girl he eventually married. "He's married already?" Nora asked, surprised at how little the news affected her. Quinn nodded. "To a girl fresh from Georgia who barely speaks above a whisper. Pretty enough, I suppose, if you like them docile and unformed." His hand found Nora's on the swing between them. "I prefer a woman with spirit and intelligence. A woman who's lived enough to know her own mind." The tenderness in his voice made Nora's heart turn over in her chest. "You're a remarkable man, Quinn Keller. Just a man who knows quality when he sees it," Quinn replied, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "Nora, I know it's soon, too soon, perhaps, but these feelings I have for you." He took a deep breath. "I've never felt this way about anyone, not even my late wife, God rest her soul. With her, we were childhood sweethearts, an expected match. But with you, it's different. It's as if something inside me recognized you from the first moment." Nora felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. "I feel it too," she admitted softly. "This connection between us. But it terrifies me, Quinn. What if it's just gratitude on my part? Or worse, what if you wake up one day and regret choosing a woman my age?" Quinn's eyes, so blue and earnest in the lantern light, held her steadily. "I won't regret it, ever. And what's between us isn't gratitude, it's recognition. Two people who have lived enough to know what matters." He squeezed her hand gently. "I'm not asking for promises tonight, Nora, just the chance to court you properly, to show you that what I feel is real and lasting." Relief flooded Nora at not being pressed for declarations she wasn't quite ready to make. "I would like that very much, Quinn." His smile was like sunrise breaking over the prairie. "Good, because I plan to do this right." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a husky murmur, "Starting with asking permission to kiss you again." Nora's pulse quickened as she nodded, unable to find her voice. Quinn's lips met hers, gentle at first, then with growing intensity as she responded to him. His hand cupped her cheek, thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized she'd shed. When they finally parted, both a little breathless, Quinn rested his forehead against hers. "I should go," he said reluctantly. "It's getting late and your reputation is already the subject of town gossip, no doubt," Nora finished wryly. "But you're right. The school teacher should maintain certain standards." Quinn stood, drawing her to her feet. "I'll call on you tomorrow evening if that's acceptable." Perhaps dinner at the hotel. I'd like that, Nora agreed, walking with him to the porch steps. With a final, brief kiss, Quinn mounted his horse and rode off into the night, leaving Nora with the lingering warmth of his touch and the growing certainty that her life had taken an unexpected but wonderful turn. The autumn weeks passed in a blur of teaching days and evenings with Quinn. True to his word, he courted her properly dinners at the hotel, rides in his buggy, Sunday picnics by the river. Always respectful, always attentive, he never pressed for more than she was ready to give. The town observed their courtship with approving interest. The schoolteacher and the rancher made a handsome couple. Folks agreed. Even Mayor Dawes, initially concerned about losing his teacher to marriage, commented that perhaps an exception could be made to the policy requiring female teachers to be single, should the need arise. As October gave way to November, Quinn invited Nora to Crescent Moon Ranch for the first time. "Sunday dinner," he explained. "Martha's dying to show you the place, and my foreman's wife, Rosa, has been planning the menu for days." The ranch exceeded Nora's expectations. The main house was a substantial two-story structure built of limestone with a wide, wrap-around porch. Cottonwood trees provided shade, and a kitchen garden flourished behind the house. Several outbuildings, bunkhouses, and corrals completed the settlement, with cattle grazing on the rolling hills beyond. Martha greeted them at the door, her face alight with pleasure. "Finally, I was beginning to think Quinn was keeping you all to himself." The interior of the house revealed Quinn's prosperity and taste. Comfortable furnishings, braided rugs on polished wood floors, landscape paintings, and as promised, a room dedicated to books, hundreds of them, lining custom-built shelves from floor to ceiling. "Quinn," Nora breathed, running her fingers along the leather spines. "This is magnificent," he smiled, pleased by her reaction. "Been collecting since I was a boy. Books were scarce where I grew up in Kentucky. Promised myself I'd have plenty if I ever could." Rosa Figueroa, a plump, energetic woman in her 50s, served a feast: roast beef, chicken with dumplings, fresh vegetables from the garden, and 3 kinds of pie. Her husband, Miguel, Quinn's foreman for 15 years, joined them for the meal, along with the Figueroa's daughter Elena and her husband Pablo, who also worked on the ranch. The conversation flowed easily, the atmosphere warm and familial. Nora observed Quinn with his extended ranch family, noting the respect and affection with which they treated one another. This was a man who valued people, who created community around him. After dinner, Quinn showed her the rest of the house, including the upstairs room's 4 bedrooms and a sitting room with a view of the distant river. "The master bedroom," he said, opening a door to reveal a spacious room with a large 4-poster bed, a dressing table, and a chest of drawers. "Martha's had it redecorated recently, said the old furnishings were too masculine." Nora could see Martha's touch in the flowered curtains, the quilted bedspread, the vase of dried wildflowers on the dresser. "It's lovely," she said sincerely. Quinn hesitated, then said quietly, "I've been thinking it could use a woman's personal touch. The right woman's touch." The implication was clear, and Nora felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Quinn," he took her hands in his expression earnest, "I'm not proposing, not yet. That deserves a special moment of its own. I'm just letting you know where my heart is headed, Nora. Where I hope we're both headed." Nora squeezed his hands, overwhelmed by emotion. "I care for you deeply, Quinn, more than I thought possible after such a short time." But you need more time," Quinn finished for her. "I understand. I can be patient, Nora. For you, I can wait as long as it takes." As they rode back to town in the gathering dusk, Quinn's arm around her in the buggy to ward off the November chill, Nora found herself imagining a future at Crescent Moon, waking up in that beautiful bedroom, sharing meals with Quinn and the extended ranch family, perhaps even children of their own someday, if it wasn't too late. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. After the disappointment of Harold Winters, she had convinced herself that marriage and family were no longer possibilities for her. Now, against all expectations, a good man was offering her precisely that future. "You're quiet," Quinn observed as they neared Laredo. "Just thinking," Nora replied, "about how differently things have turned out from what I expected when I first arrived in Texas." Quinn's arm tightened around her. For the better, I hope. Nora leaned her head against his shoulder. Infinitely better. The following week brought an unexpected letter from Boston, a former colleague informing Nora that her old teaching position had reopened, and the school board was eager to have her back. The salary offered was nearly twice what she earned in Laredo. Nora stared at the letter, conflicted emotions warring within her. 3 months ago, such an offer would have seemed a godsend. Now, the thought of returning to Boston filled her with dismay rather than excitement. She shared the news with Quinn that evening as they sat on her porch after supper. "Will you go?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral though his hands clenched on his knees betrayed his tension. "I don't know," Nora admitted honestly. "Financially, it would be foolish to refuse, and Boston was my home for so many years." Quinn was silent for a long moment. "I understand," he said finally. "You have to consider what's best for your future." "Quinn," Nora began, hearing the resignation in his voice. "I'm not saying I want to go, I'm just surprised by the offer and feeling obligated to consider it seriously." He nodded, his expression grave. "Of course, it's an opportunity you should think about." He stood abruptly. "I should go. It's getting late and you have decisions to make." Before Nora could protest, he was down the steps and mounting his horse. "Quinn, wait," she called, but he merely touched his hat brim and rode away, leaving her confused and distressed on her porch. The next day, Quinn didn't come to call as had become his habit, nor did he appear the following day. By the 3rd day of his absence, Nora was frantic with worry and regret. Had she driven him away with her indecision? Had he decided she wasn't worth waiting for? On the 4th day, unable to bear the separation any longer, Nora borrowed a horse from the livery stable and rode out to Crescent Moon. She found Quinn mending a corral fence, his shirt sleeves rolled up, his expression grim with concentration. He looked up at the sound of approaching hoofbeats, surprise crossing his face when he recognized her. "Nora, is everything all right?" Dismounting, Nora tied her horse to the corral post and approached him, her heart pounding. "No, everything is not all right. You disappeared without a word, Quinn. 4 days of silence when we've seen each other every day for weeks." Quinn set down his hammer, wiping his hands on his denims. "I thought you needed space to make your decision. What I needed was to talk to the man I love about a decision that affects us both." The words burst out of Nora before she could censor them. Quinn went very still. "The man you love," Nora's anger deflated, replaced by vulnerability. "Yes," she admitted softly. "I love you, Quinn Keller. I think I have almost from the beginning, and the thought of returning to Boston without you is unbearable." In 2 strides, Quinn closed the distance between them, gathering her in his arms. "Say it again," he murmured against her hair. "I love you," Nora repeated, her voice stronger now. "And I'm not going anywhere. My home is here now, with you if you'll have me." Quinn pulled back to look at her, his blue eyes intense with emotion. "If I'll have you." "Nora, I've been carrying this around for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Nora's breath caught as he opened it to reveal a ring of sapphire surrounded by tiny diamonds in a delicate gold setting. "It was my grandmother's," Quinn explained, his voice husky with emotion. "I had it sized for you in San Antonio." He took her hand, his eyes never leaving hers. "Nora Miller, I love you more than I thought it was possible to love anyone. You're exactly what I've been waiting for all these years. Will you marry me, make Crescent Moon your home, build a life with me?" Tears streaming down her face, Nora nodded. "Yes, yes to all of it." Quinn slid the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms for a kiss that left no doubt about the depth of his feelings. When they finally parted, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "I was a fool to stay away," he murmured. "I thought I was giving you space, but I was really just protecting my heart in case you chose Boston." "There was never really a choice," Nora admitted. "Not once I allowed myself to believe that this us could be real." Quinn kissed her again, then glanced around at the half-mended fence, the waiting horse, the afternoon sun. "To hell with the fence," he declared. "Let's go tell Martha and the others. Then we'll ride into town and inform Mayor Dawes he'll need to find a new teacher by spring." "Spring?" Nora questioned, allowing him to lead her toward the house. "That's months away." Quinn's smile was both tender and mischievous. I thought a Christmas wedding would be nice. Unless you'd prefer to wait longer, Christmas is perfect, Nora agreed, her heart so full it felt it might burst. Absolutely perfect. Word of their engagement spread through Laredo like wildfire. The town's reaction was overwhelmingly positive congratulations, well wishes, and offers of help with wedding preparations poured in from all quarters. Even Mayor Dawes, after his initial disappointment at losing his teacher, graciously offered the town hall for the wedding reception. The weeks leading up to Christmas passed in a blur of activity. Martha and a committee of Laredo ladies took charge of the wedding arrangements, transforming the simple church into a holiday wonderland with evergreen boughs, red ribbons, and candles. Nora, with Quinn's enthusiastic approval, continued teaching through December, planning to resume in January until a replacement could be found. Quinn, meanwhile, worked with a carpenter to add built-in bookshelves to the master bedroom at Crescent Moon, a wedding gift for his book-loving bride. He also began construction on a small schoolhouse on the ranch property, envisioning a place where Nora could teach the children of his ranch hands and neighboring homesteads if she wished to continue her calling. 2 days before Christmas, Nora was putting final touches on the wedding dress Martha had helped her make, a creation of cream-colored satin with lace at the collar and cuffs, when a knock came at her cottage door. Opening it, she found a stranger, a distinguished-looking older gentleman in a well-cut traveling suit. "Miss Nora Miller?" he inquired, hat in hand. "Yes," Nora confirmed, puzzled. "How may I help you?" "Harold Winters, madam," the man introduced himself. "Harold Winters Sr. from San Antonio. I believe you're acquainted with my son." Shock rendered Nora momentarily speechless. Finally finding her voice, she said, "Mr. Winters, this is unexpected." "I imagine so," the elder Winters agreed. "May I come in? I promise not to take much of your time." Reluctantly, Nora stepped back, allowing him entry into her small front room. "Please sit down. Can I offer you tea?" "Thank you, no." Harold Sr. settled into the rocking chair, studying her with shrewd eyes. "I'll come straight to the point, Miss Miller. I recently became aware of how my son treated you when you arrived in San Antonio in response to his advertisement. I want to offer my sincere apologies for his behavior. It was unconscionable." Nora blinked in surprise. "That's very kind of you, Mr. Winters, but unnecessary. Your son's actions, while painful at the time, ultimately led me to a much happier situation." She touched the sapphire ring on her finger, drawing the man's attention to it. "So I understand," he said with a slight smile. "Quinn Keller is the reason for my visit, actually. When he came to our home and spoke with my son, I was impressed by his character. And when I later learned he was courting you, I felt compelled to make amends for my family's part in your distress." "I assure you, no amends are necessary," Nora said firmly. "As I said, things have worked out for the best." Harold Sr. nodded thoughtfully. "Indeed they have. Keller is a fine man with an excellent reputation. My son, on the other hand," he sighed heavily. "Harold has always been somewhat shallow. His young bride is already finding marriage to him less than idyllic, I'm afraid." Nora felt a pang of sympathy for the unknown girl. "I'm sorry to hear that." "Yes, well." The older man straightened his shoulders. "I didn't come to discuss my son's marriage. I came to give you this." He withdrew an envelope from his coat pocket and extended it to her. "Consider it a wedding gift, or if you prefer, compensation for the inconvenience and distress my son caused you." Nora accepted the envelope warily, opening it to find a bank draft for a substantial sum, $500. "Mr. Winters, I cannot accept this," she said, attempting to return it. He held up a hand to stop her. "Please, Miss Miller, it would ease my conscience considerably. Use it for your new home, or save it for the children you and Keller will hopefully be blessed with." He stood, placing his hat on his head. "I wish you every happiness in your marriage. Keller is a fortunate man." Before Nora could protest further, Harold Winters Sr. bowed slightly and took his leave, the click of the door behind him punctuating his departure. Stunned, Nora stared at the bank draft in her hands. $500 was a small fortune, more than a year's teaching salary in Laredo. The possibilities it represented were dizzying: books for Quinn's library, improvements to the ranch, a nest egg for their future family. That evening, when Quinn called, she showed him the draft and related Harold Sr.'s visit. "Well, I'll be damned," Quinn said, examining the bank draft. "The father's a better man than the son, it seems." "I'm not sure I should accept it," Nora worried. "It feels rather like being paid for a broken engagement, which is archaic and somewhat insulting." Quinn considered this. "Or it's the gesture of a decent man trying to right a wrong his family committed. Either way, it's yours to decide what to do with." He handed the draft back to her. "Whatever you choose, I'll support." After much reflection, Nora decided to accept the money, but with a condition of her own. She wrote to Harold Winters Sr., thanking him for his generosity, and informing him that half the sum would be donated to establish a scholarship fund for young women in Laredo who wished to pursue higher education. Christmas Eve dawned clear and cold, the Texas winter bringing a rare dusting of frost that glittered in the morning sun. By afternoon, the church was filled with flowers, greenery, and nearly every resident of Laredo and the surrounding ranches. In the small room behind the altar where Nora prepared for the ceremony, Martha helped her with the final adjustments to her wedding dress and veil. "You look beautiful," Martha said, securing the lace veil with a comb adorned with tiny pearls, another gift from Quinn. "Absolutely radiant." Nora studied her reflection in the small mirror, hardly recognizing the woman who looked back at her. Her cheeks were flushed with excitement, her eyes bright, her smile relaxed and genuine. She looked happy, truly, deeply happy in a way she had never expected to be. "I can hardly believe this is happening," Nora confessed. 6 months ago, I was a spinster schoolteacher in Boston with no prospects and dwindling hope. Now I'm about to marry the most wonderful man I've ever known." Martha squeezed her hands. "It's happening because you were brave enough to take a chance, even after being hurt. Quinn has waited a long time for someone like you, Nora, someone who sees him for who he truly is and loves him for it." A knock at the door preceded the pastor's announcement that it was time. Martha gave Nora a quick hug, then hurried to take her place in the church as matron of honor. With no father or male relatives to give her away, Nora had decided to walk down the aisle alone, a symbol, she told Quinn, of her choice to come to him as a free and independent woman, giving herself freely rather than being given by another. As the first notes of music filled the church, Nora took a deep breath and opened the door. The congregation rose, faces turning to watch her progress down the aisle. But Nora saw only Quinn, standing tall and handsome at the altar, his blue eyes fixed on her with such love that it nearly took her breath away. When she reached him, Quinn took her hands in his smile more brilliant than all the candles illuminating the church. "You're right on time," he whispered, echoing his words from their first real conversation. "For you," Nora whispered back, "always for you." The pastor's words washed over them traditional vows that they had chosen to supplement with brief personal pledges. When it was Quinn's turn, his voice rang clear and strong through the church. "Nora, when you stepped off that stagecoach in Laredo, something in my heart recognized you, though we'd never met. You came here thinking you'd lost your chance at happiness, but you were exactly where you needed to be, exactly when you needed to be there. I promise to spend the rest of my life showing you that your age, your experiences, every moment that brought you to me are precious gifts that I will treasure always. I love you, Nora Miller, today and every day for the rest of our lives." Tears streaming down her face, Nora managed to steady her voice for her own vows. "Quinn, you saw value in me when I had stopped seeing it in myself. You reminded me that life doesn't end at 30, that love can find us at any age, that what matters isn't youth but the capacity to give and receive love fully, without reservation. I promise to be your partner, your friend, your lover, and your steadfast companion through whatever life brings us. I love you with all that I am and all that I will ever be." The exchange of rings, the pronouncement of husband and wife, the kiss that sealed their vows all passed in a blur of joy so intense Nora felt she might float away if not for Quinn's solid presence anchoring her to earth. The reception at the town hall was a jubilant affair, with music, dancing, and enough food to feed twice the number of guests present. Quinn and Nora moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and well wishes, sharing brief moments of private connection amid the public celebration. As the evening grew late, Quinn whispered in her ear, "Ready to go home, Mrs. Keller." The name, so new and yet so right, made Nora's heart skip a beat. "Yes," she whispered back, "take me home." They slipped away amid cheers and good-natured teasing, climbing into the buggy Quinn had decorated with evergreen boughs and ribbons for the occasion. As they drove toward Crescent Moon, the stars emerged in the clear winter sky, the crescent moon casting silver light on the landscape. "Happy?" Quinn asked, his arm secure around her shoulders. "Beyond words," Nora replied, leaning against him. "I keep thinking I might wake up and find this has all been a wonderful dream." Quinn's laugh was warm in the cold night air. "Not a dream, my love, just life taking an unexpected but perfect turn." When they reached the ranch, Quinn surprised her by stopping the buggy and coming around to her side. Before she could step down, he swept her into his arms. "Quinn," Nora gasped, laughing, "what are you doing?" "Carrying my bride over the threshold," he replied, grinning as he ascended the porch steps with her in his arms. "It's tradition." The house was warm, lit with lamps and a fire in the hearth. On the hall table stood a vase of winter flowers, Martha's touch. No doubt, and the delicious scent of cinnamon and apples lingered in the air. Quinn set Nora gently on her feet in the center of the front room, then took her face in his hands. "Welcome home, Nora Keller," he murmured, his voice husky with emotion. "To our home," Nora echoed, savoring the words. "I like the sound of that." Upstairs in the master bedroom, Quinn showed her the bookshelves he'd had installed empty and waiting for her collection to join his. "I thought we could merge our libraries," he explained, "yours and mine becoming ours like everything else." The symbolism touched Nora deeply. "It's perfect," she said, running her fingers along the smooth wooden shelves. "Absolutely perfect." Later, as they lay entwined in the big four-poster bed, Quinn traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "No regrets?" he asked softly. Nora raised herself on one elbow to look into his beloved face. "Not a single one," she assured him. "How could I regret finding you, finding home?" Quinn smiled, pulling her close again. "When I saw you that first day, looking so lost and yet so determined, I knew you were special. Then when Martha told me about Harold Winters, I was angry for you, but also selfishly grateful that he'd been fool enough to let you go." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "His loss, my incredible gain." "Our gain," Nora corrected. "Both of us found what we needed exactly when we needed it." "Right on time," Quinn murmured, echoing his words from their wedding. "You were right on time for me, Nora Keller." "And you for me," Nora replied, nestling closer into his embrace. "Perfectly, wonderfully on time." Spring came to Crescent Moon Ranch in a riot of wildflowers and new beginnings. The small schoolhouse Quinn had built was completed, and Nora had begun teaching the children from the ranch and neighboring properties 3 days a week. The other days she devoted to her writing. The novel she had spoken of to Quinn on their first picnic was taking shape, page by page. Life as Mrs. Quinn Keller suited Nora better than she could have imagined. She and Quinn had settled into marriage with an ease that felt both miraculous and perfectly natural. They worked together, read together, planned together, and loved together with a depth of connection that grew stronger with each passing day. On a warm May afternoon, as they picnicked on the same riverbank where Quinn had given her the Crescent Moon bookmark, Nora shared the news she had suspected for weeks, but had only just confirmed with Dr. Wilson's discreet examination. "Quinn," she said, taking his hand as they sat on the blanket watching the river flow by, "I have something to tell you." He turned to her, his blue eyes curious. "What is it, love?" Nora took a deep breath, still hardly believing it herself. "We're going to have a baby. In November, doctor. Wilson thinks." Quinn's expression transformed from surprise to wonder to pure joy in the span of seconds. "A baby, you're certain?" Nora nodded, tears of happiness threatening to spill. "Quite certain. It seems I wasn't too old after all." "Of course you weren't," Quinn said fiercely, gathering her into his arms. "I told you, 32 isn't old, it's perfect. You're perfect." He laid a gentle hand on her still flat stomach, "And this baby will be perfect too." As Quinn peppered her face with kisses, his joy infectious. Nora reflected on the strange and wonderful path that had led her here. A mail-order bride arrangement gone wrong, a chance meeting with a kind-eyed cowboy, a new beginning in a town she'd never heard of until desperation brought her to its dusty streets. "What are you thinking?" Quinn asked, noticing her momentary introspection. "About fate," Nora replied, smiling up at the man who had become her world. "About how sometimes what seems like the worst thing that could happen turns out to be the doorway to the best thing that ever happened." Quinn nodded, understanding perfectly as he always did. "Harold Winters did us both a favor, didn't he?" "He certainly did," Nora agreed, laughing. "Perhaps we should name the baby after him." "Absolutely not," Quinn protested, chuckling, "but we could name a calf after him, the scrawniest, most ill-tempered one in next spring's herd." As their laughter rang out across the river, Nora leaned against her husband, content in a way she had never imagined possible when she'd arrived in Texas a year ago. Harold Winters had told her she was too old, but Quinn Keller had known better. She had been right on time for Quinn, for Laredo, for the life that was unfolding before her with all its unexpected joys and promises. Right on time indeed.